At 64, I discovered that revenge is best served cold, but with a special seasoning of humor. When my son called to say he was invading my farm with 12 people without my consent, something inside me broke. It wasn't anger, it was liberation. You can't imagine what I prepared to welcome them. Let me introduce myself. I'm Luia Brandeo, that lady who worked her whole life in textiles, building a company from scratch after my husband passed away. For 40 years, I woke up at 5 a.m., went to bed after midnight, dealing with suppliers, difficult clients, employees, taxes, and all that bureaucracy that only business owners know. I raised my son alone during that time, giving all I could. And maybe that was my biggest mistake. 6 months ago, I decided enough was enough. I sold the company for a fair price, not exorbitant, but enough to ensure a comfortable life for the rest of my days. And what did I want most? Peace. Silence. Waking up to the sound of birds instead of truck noise. Watching the sunrise without checking emails. Smelling the grass and wet earth instead of the artificial perfume of the office. That's how I found the Recanto das Araras farm, in the countryside of Minas Gerais, near Serenopolis. 200 hectares of green, a colonial house that I lovingly renovated, keeping its historical essence but adding all the comfort my tired bones needed. I hired SCU Joaquim as the foreman, a 72-year-old man who knows every inch of that land like the back of his hand. And also Marta Rezende, a dedicated 45-year-old woman to take care of the house and keep me company. They became my chosen family, the kind you find along the way. The first few weeks were an adjustment. Even wanting peace, 40 years of a hectic routine don't disappear overnight. I woke up at 5 out of habit, without an alarm. I felt lost, not knowing what to do with so much free time. I started exploring the farm. I discovered a hidden waterfall among the trees, which I named the Waterfall of Silence. There, sitting on the rocks, listening only to the water, I finally understood what peace was. My son Marcelo, 42, a marketing executive in Sao Paulo, rarely called, "Mom, is everything okay in this end of the world?" That's how he referred to my new life, always with that tone of superiority, as if my choice was a setback, an old lady's madness. But I knew what lay behind that disdain. He had always relied on my money, my availability, my house in the capital as an extension of his own. 8 months ago, he married Patricia Zamboni, a 38-year-old digital influencer who calls herself a lifestyle expert. I never quite understood what that means, but I know she spends the day showcasing expensive clothes, exclusive places, and giving tips on how to be authentic. All while using filters that turn her into someone else. I've never liked her, I confess. Not for what she does, but for the way she treats people around her, especially restaurant staff, shopkeepers, and her husband's mother. The first time they visited the farm 3 months ago was a disaster. Patricia complained about the slow internet, the lack of air conditioning in every room, the bugs, the heat, and the food being too simple. I brought 3 suitcases for a weekend and stayed just one night, claiming a work emergency that I later discovered on social media was the opening of an imported handbag store. Marcelo, as always, sided with her. "Mom, you need to modernize this place. No one can stand this heat. And this country food? Why not hire a chef?" I swallowed hard. I remembered how many times I ate the same rice and beans for days to pay for his private school tuition, English classes, and graduation trips. I took a deep breath and just smiled. "Son, the farm is simple because I want it that way. It's my paradise." They left on Sunday afternoon, and I felt such a relief that I found myself crying on the porch as I watched them go. It wasn't sadness, it was pure liberation. Marta brought me a coffee and sat down beside me. "Mrs. Luia, you're too good. That boy doesn't appreciate anything you've done." In the following weeks, I returned to my peaceful routine. I learned to make homemade bread with Marta. Mr. Joaquim taught me to ride a horse. Yes, at 64, I got on a horse for the first time. I fell twice, got up 3 times, and started a small herb garden. I read 10 books that had been on my list for years. I watched the sunset every day from the Mirante do Sasigo, the highest point of the farm. Life finally had the flavor I had always wanted to taste. Until one Friday in April, my phone rang. It was Marcelo. Usually, when he calls, it's because he needs something, money, business advice, or to complain about something. I answered with my heart already tight. "Mom, how are you? I'm calling to let you know I'm coming to the farm tomorrow." "That's great, son. I'll prepare your room and make that chicken stew you liked as a kid." "Oh, it's not just that. I'm bringing Patricia, of course, and her family too." "Family? How many people?" There was a pause, as if he were counting mentally. "Well, besides me and Patricia, there's Vittoria, her mother, her kids from her first marriage, Julia and Lucas, her brother Claudio with his wife Vanessa, cousin Raphael with his wife Christina. Oh, and 2 of Lucas's friends who are spending the weekend with him." I did the math. 12 people. 12 people in my house uninvited. 12 people invading my space, my peace, my silence. I felt my blood boil, but I kept my voice calm. "Son, the farm isn't prepared for so many people. I don't have enough rooms or food stocked." That's when he interrupted me with the phrase that changed everything. "Mom, I'm coming to the farm with my wife and 10 of her relatives. If you don't like it, just go back to the city." Silence. My silence was so deep that he asked if I was still on the line. I was processing every word, every tone of that arrogant phrase. In that moment, something broke inside me. It was no longer about the invasion itself, but about years of being taken for granted, having my space, my time, my money, my life considered his property. "All right, son. I'll go to the city." Then, he seemed surprised by my quick agreement. Maybe he expected the usual resistance followed by my surrender, but not this time. "Really? You're not going to be upset?" "No, son. It's your house too." I lied. In that moment, I decided he needed to learn a lesson about respect and consideration. As soon as I hung up, I called Marta and Joaquin to the porch of the big house. The sun was beginning to set behind the mountains, painting the sky orange and pink. I sat in the rocking chair, poured 3 glasses of Jabuticaba liqueur that I had made myself, and started to share my plan. At first, they looked at me in shock. Then, shyly, they began to smile, and by the time I finished explaining, we were all laughing so hard that tears streamed down our faces. The next morning, I woke up early, as usual. The sun hadn't fully appeared yet. Only a golden light was starting to peek over the mountains that embrace my farm. I had my coffee on the porch, feeling the fresh dew on the plants and listening to the songs of the birds that gave the property its name. Recanto das Araras wasn't a name I invented. It already existed, and I decided to keep it out of respect for the history of the place. And because, indeed, we have dozens of canindamacas nesting in the tallest trees. As I watched one of them flying majestically against the brightening sky, I reflected on my journey to this point. I've always been a city woman. I was born in Belo Horizonte, grew up among buildings, honking horns, and the fast pace that Sao Paulo would later intensify. When I married Roberto at 23, I envisioned a traditional life, maybe some kids, a house with a yard, family weekends. He was an accountant. I had a small clothing store that I inherited from my mother, but life is unpredictable. Roberto passed away from a sudden heart attack when Marcelo was just 5 years old. Suddenly, I found myself alone with a small child and a store that barely paid the bills. That's when I discovered a strength within me that I didn't even know existed. I transformed that little shop into a clothing factory. I studied business administration at night. I knocked on doors that closed in my face because I was a woman and a widow. "Very risky, Mrs. Luia. What if you get sick? Who will take care of the boy? Who pays the loan?" With each no, I grew stronger. I started by making uniforms for small companies, then schools, then supermarket chains. By the time Marcelo turned 15, we had a factory with 50 employees and 3 stores. When he turned 20, we had 200 employees and contracts with major companies all over Brazil. As the business grew, I shrank, missing my son's birthdays, graduations, soccer games, always justifying it by saying I was building a future for us. Marcelo grew up as a successful only child of a single mother, with everything money could buy and little of what really mattered: time, presence, boundaries. He graduated in marketing, worked at multinationals, and today is the director of a large agency. I must admit he has talent, but he also had all the doors open: expensive schools, exchange programs, networking I built over the years that I handed to him on a platter. I never complained. He was my son, my only son. I thought it was my duty. I sighed as I took the last sip of coffee, while those memories played like a movie in my mind. The sun was now fully above the mountains, spreading warm light over the valley where Casa Grande stands, a 1920 construction that retains its colonial charm, with wide corridors, high ceilings, large windows, and a porch that surrounds the entire house. Marta appeared, bringing more coffee and some slices of cornbread cake. She was already smiling, a partner in the plan we devised the night before. "Dona Luia, I've spoken to Joaquim. He's getting the horses ready." I smiled back, feeling a mix of anxiety and a strange rebellious joy I hadn't felt since my teenage years. "Let's get started then, Marta. We only have a few hours before they arrive." We entered the house together. Casa Grande has 6 rooms, all decorated with a blend of rustic and elegant touches. Solid wood beds I had made by the local carpenter, expensive and comfortable mattresses I brought from the capital, Egyptian cotton sheets, a luxury I allowed myself, and antiques I've collected over the years. The bathrooms are modern and functional, keeping original elements like marble sinks and restored antique mirrors. We began to dismantle all the beds, stacking the mattresses in the middle of each room. We removed the clean sheets, leaving only the protectors. We took the towels from the bathrooms, leaving just one in each, the oldest and most faded we could find. We disconnected the Wi-Fi, hiding the router in my room, which would be locked. Downstairs, the main room is spacious, with leather sofas I brought from my home in Sao Paulo, a rustic wooden coffee table I bought from a local craftsman, and Persian rugs I've collected over time. On the walls, paintings by Brazilian artists I've always admired. In the corner, a piano I still haven't learned to play, but I promised myself I would in this new phase. There's also a dining room with a table for 12. The irony didn't escape me at that moment. And a large, well-equipped kitchen, with a central island where I like to have breakfast when it's too cold for the porch. Joaquim arrived around 9 a.m., bringing with him Mimoso, Estrella, Ventania, Treveo, and Caramello, the 5 horses we keep on the farm. They were gentle animals, used to humans, employed for short rides around the property and daily work. "Dona Luia, are you sure about this?" he asked, scratching his gray head, still with a look that was both amused and concerned. "Absolutely, Joaquim. It's time for my son to learn some lessons I didn't teach when I should have." We then began to guide the horses into the main house. The first to enter was Mimoso, a calm-tempered white horse. He hesitated at the entrance, not understanding what we wanted, but with carrots and apples, we soon got him inside. The others followed with less resistance. The animals were restless at first, not used to the wooden floor that made strange noises under their hooves. Marta spread hay in the corners to help them feel more comfortable. Gradually, they relaxed and began exploring the new environment. Meanwhile, Joaquim and I went to the pool, a modern structure I had built overlooking the valley. We turned off the filtration system and tossed in dry leaves, dirt, and a bit of natural dye Joaquim used for leather. The crystal-clear water quickly turned a murky brownish green, not inviting at all. I returned inside the house, where the horses were already more at ease. Caramello, the youngest, had knocked over a flower vase in the living room and was happily munching on the daisies. Thunder, the biggest of them, had just left a stinky gift right on my favorite Persian rug. Instead of getting mad, I laughed out loud. Marta looked at me as if I had lost my mind. "Are you really okay with this, Mrs. Luia?" "Marta, this rug cost 30,000 Brazilian reals. Marcelo knows that because he complained when I bought it, saying it was a waste of money. Now he'll see what true waste is, the disrespect for other space. We continued with the preparations. We scattered old bed linens around, as if they had been used and abandoned. We left dirty dishes in the sink and spoiled food in the fridge. We set the house lights on an irregular scheme, some working, others not. By noon, our work was almost complete. The big house, once spotless, now looked like it had been hastily abandoned and taken over by wild invaders. The horses roamed freely, leaving reminders wherever they went. The smell was no longer pleasant. That's when I had the final idea. I asked Mr. Joaquim to install a small hidden security camera in the antique chandelier hanging from the living room ceiling. It was a camera I had bought to monitor the farm entrance but had never set up. He installed it and configured it to stream directly to my tablet. Now we just need the message, I told Marta, who quickly brought paper and pen. I sat on the back porch, the only place still intact, and carefully thought about what to write. I didn't want to be cruel, just to teach a lesson. After a few attempts, I wrote, "Dear son, you always taught me that family should help each other. Since you came to enjoy the farm, I thought it fair that you also help maintain it. The cost of a daily cleaning for this farm is 12,000 Brazilian reals. If you want to hire the service, the cleaning company's number is below, or you can save money and clean it yourselves. The tools are in the back shed. With love, Mom. P.S. I will be unreachable for 2 weeks on a meditation retreat. Enjoy your stay." Below, I wrote Marta's cell number, who agreed to answer as if she were from the cleaning express company. I placed the note in an envelope and left it on the coffee table in the living room, between 2 fresh reminders of Star and Thunder. It was almost 1 p.m. when we finished. I looked around at the organized chaos we had created and felt a pang of guilt. After all, it was my home, my sanctuary. But then I remembered Marcelo's words, "If you don't like it, just go back to the city." The arrogance, the lack of consideration, treating me like I was disposable. No, he needed this lesson. "Mrs. Luia, everything is ready. The horses have enough food and water to stay comfortable until tomorrow. When will we come back for them?" Mr. Joaquim asked. "I put some mineral water and snacks in the truck for your trip," Marta added. I thanked both of them, not just for their help with the plan, but for the loyalty and friendship they had shown in recent months. They felt more like family to me at that moment than my own son. I grabbed a small suitcase I had packed the night before with clothes for a few days, medications, and personal items. I locked my room, the only space that remained untouched, and put the key in my pocket. I took one last look at the house, now occupied by 5 horses that seemed oddly content in their new surroundings. "Come on, sweetie, don't jump on the couch," I shouted at the white horse trying to settle on my Italian leather sofa. He neighed as if he understood, but continued his exploration. I got into my truck, a Toyota Hilux I bought when I moved to the farm. Another shock for Marcelo, who thought I should have a lady's car, like a Corolla or something similar. I started the engine, and before leaving, I glanced at Marta and Joaquim waving from the porch. "Take good care of my new tenants," I shouted, laughing. "And keep me updated on everything." I drove the 12 kilometers down Hope Road, the dirt path connecting the farm to the main highway. It was a well-maintained road that I had graveled as soon as I bought the property, but it still required attention, especially on the curves. As I drove, my heart raced, a mix of nerves and excitement. I was heading to the capital, where my friend Antonio Santos would host me for a few days. Antonio, besides being a longtime friend, is my lawyer and handled all the paperwork when I bought the farm. He knows the story with Marcelo well, and when I called the night before explaining the plan, he laughed so hard he almost choked. "Luia, you've always been tough in business, but I never imagined you'd do something like this to your own son," he said between laughs. "Sometimes love needs to be tough too, Antonio. And it's precisely because I love him that I can't let him continue treating people like objects at his disposal." The trip to the capital took about 3 hours. I spent the time reminiscing about Marcelo's childhood, when he was a sweet boy who drew cards for Mother's Day, when he would wait up late just to give me a kiss before bed, when he cried on my shoulder after getting his first rejection from a girl at 13. Where did I go wrong? At what point did he turn into this self-centered adult who treats his own mother like a convenience? Maybe it was when I started compensating for my absence with expensive gifts, or when I solved all his problems with money or influence instead of letting him face the consequences of his actions. Perhaps it was when I failed to set clear boundaries, afraid of losing his love since we spent so little time together. These reflections accompanied me until I reached the city limits. The traffic was already heavy, even though it was Saturday. I had forgotten how noisy and chaotic the capital was. After a few minutes stuck in a jam, I grabbed my phone and turned it off. I didn't want to be reachable when Marcelo discovered the surprise. I arrived at Antonio's place around 5 p.m. He lives in a spacious apartment in the city's most tree-lined neighborhood, with a wide balcony that somewhat resembles the one at my farm. Maybe that's why I always felt so at home there. "Welcome, terrorist," he joked as he greeted me with a hug. "Want a drink to celebrate your late rebellion?" I accepted a glass of wine, and we sat on the balcony. The sun was beginning to set, painting the city sky in orange hues between the buildings. It wasn't the view from the lookout of tranquility, but it had its urban charm. "So, what time does the royal entourage arrive at the farm?" Antonio asked, pouring more wine. "Marcelo said they would leave early today. Considering the stops they will surely make along the way, they should arrive around 4 or 5 in the afternoon." I looked at the clock. 5:20 p.m. In theory, they should already be arriving. As if responding to my thoughts, my tablet emitted an alert. It was the security camera detecting movement at the farm entrance. Antonio and I leaned in anxiously toward the screen. The image showed 3 cars entering the Casa Grande yard, Marcelo's BMW in front, followed by a deep compass that I recognized as Claudio's, Patricia's brother-in-law. And lastly, a Land Rover, which likely belonged to Rafael, the cousin. Imported cars for a farm with dirt roads. "That's where common sense starts," Antonio commented ironically. We watched as they parked and began unloading an absurd amount of luggage. It looked like they were planning to stay a month, not just a weekend. Patricia, wearing a light dress completely unsuitable for the countryside and high heels, was already complaining about something we couldn't hear, gesturing angrily at the dust the cars had kicked up. "Your daughter-in-law is quite a character," Antonio laughed. "Daughter-in-law, if today goes as planned," I replied, surprising myself with the bitter tone. We continued watching as the group approached the front door. Marcelo had the key and turned it in the lock, pushing the door open with a smile that would soon turn to shock. The moment they entered and encountered the horses was priceless. The camera didn't capture sound, but it didn't need to. Their expressions said it all. Patricia covered her mouth in horror. Her mother, Vittoria, started shouting something while pointing at the ground. The young ones, whom I assumed were Julia and Lucas, looked stunned, their phones already in hand, probably trying to catch a signal. Marcelo stood frozen at the entrance while the others crowded behind him. Some tried to enter, while others recoiled with disgust. That's when Caramello, the youngest and most playful horse, happily approached Patricia, likely attracted by something shiny on her dress. She jumped back so quickly that she fell sitting on the porch. Antonio and I couldn't hold back our laughter. It was like watching a silent comedy film, except it was real, and I was the director behind the scene. Finally, Marcelo seemed to snap out of his trance and entered the house, carefully stepping over the presents left by the horses. The rest of the group stayed on the porch, seemingly debating what to do. Only Claudio, the unemployed brother-in-law, followed Marcelo inside. We saw my son find the envelope on the coffee table. His face, previously pale with shock, now turned red with anger as he read my message. He said something to Claudio, who took the paper to read as well, then handed it back with an expression that seemed to say, "We're in trouble." Marcelo pulled out his phone and began dialing, undoubtedly my number. I could see his expression growing more frustrated as the call went to voicemail. "I think your son is a bit upset," Antonio commented, pouring more wine. He just found out that even at 64, you're still smarter than he is. I smiled, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and a hint of remorse. But then I remembered Marcelo's arrogance, how he treated my house like it was his property, how he disrespected my space and my peace without a second thought. Sometimes we need a shock to wake up, I said, raising my glass. The late education. Antonio raised his glass too, and we toasted while watching the chaos unfold on the tablet. Patricia was gesturing furiously at Marcelo, who was still trying to call me. The others were already starting to head back to their cars, clearly unwilling to spend another minute in that environment. It was done. The lesson was given. Now it was time to see if it would be learned. I settled better on Antonio's apartment balcony, holding the tablet with both hands to catch every detail of the scene unfolding. The sun was already setting in the capital, but there was still enough light on the farm to clearly see the disaster happening in my living room. It was like watching a reality show, except I knew all the characters intimately. Do you see that girl in the floral shirt yelling at Marcelo? That's Vittoria, Patricia's mother. I explained to Antonio, who was watching with me, fascinated. She's been a widow for 10 years and lives off her late husband's pension, but she acts like she's the heir to an empire. In the video, Vittoria was gesturing furiously while Marcelo seemed to be trying to calm her down. In the background, the adorable white horse approached the group curiously, making everyone back away in panic. That younger guy trying to scare the horse with a magazine? Antonio asked. Must be Lucas, Patricia's oldest son from her first marriage. He's 23 and, as far as I know, hasn't finished college yet. He's in the 6th year of a 4-year program. While we were talking, Antonio's phone rang. He looked at the screen and showed it to me. It was Marcelo. He must have remembered we're friends and I'm trying to reach you, Antonio said. Should I answer or let it go to voicemail? I thought for a moment. Answer, but don't reveal where I am. Tell him you tried to call me earlier and couldn't. Antonio nodded and answered, putting it on speaker. Antonio, it's Marcelo Brandeo, Luia's son. Hi, Marcelo. How are you? Antonio replied with an admirable faint calm. No, things are not good at all. Do you know where my mom is? I've been trying to talk to her for an hour. I don't know, Marcelo. I called her this morning to check on things at the farm, but she didn't answer. I thought she might have gone to Serenopolis to shop. Why? Did something happen? There was silence on the other end, as if Marcelo was deciding how much to reveal. Antonio, she went crazy. I arrived at the farm with my family, and the house is a complete disaster. There are horses. Horses walking around the living room. Animal poop everywhere. The pool looks like a swamp. Antonio covered his mouth to stifle a laugh. My God, Marcelo, that's terrible. Were you robbed? Did you call the police? No, we weren't robbed. It was my mom who did this. She left a note saying that if we wanted to clean the house, we'd have to pay 12,000 Brazilian reals or do it ourselves. Is that right, 12,000? Wow, it sounds like your mom is expressing some kind of dissatisfaction, Antonio suggested, keeping a neutral tone while I bit my lip to avoid laughing out loud. Discontent? Is this madness? She has always been controlling, but now she has crossed the line. What am I going to do with all these people here? Patricia is already losing it. Her mother is threatening to sue and there are horses in the living room. That's when we heard a high-pitched female voice in the background yelling, Marcelo, that horse just peed on my suitcase. Luiv, I'm leaving right now. Antonio and I exchanged glances and had to hold back our laughter. He took a deep breath before responding. Marcelo, I think you guys should get out of there and go to a hotel in Serenopolis. I'll keep trying to talk to your mom. When I do, I'll ask her to get in touch with you. Hotel? In that godforsaken place. Antonio, you're not understanding the seriousness of the situation. This is domestic terrorism. Calm down, Marcelo. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. Your mom has always been a balanced person. Something must have happened. Yes, something did happen. She aged and went crazy. Look, if you talk to her, tell her this won't just blow over. I'm leaving now, but I'll come back with a lawyer. This is unacceptable. The call ended abruptly. Antonio put the phone down, and we finally let out the laughter we had been holding back. Domestic terrorism? I repeated between laughs. My God, does he really think he's the victim in all this? We turned our attention to the tablet, where the group was already in full retreat. We could see Patricia dragging a suitcase across the yard, visibly complaining, while the others loaded their things back into the cars. Marcelo was the last to leave, looking at the house as if he couldn't believe what had just happened. Should we follow them until they leave the property? Suggested Antonio. No need, I replied. The camera only shows the living room and the entrance, but I can call SEU Joaquim and ask him to watch from a distance. I grabbed the second phone I kept for emergencies and called the foreman, who answered on the first ring. Dona Luia, you won't believe what just happened, he said, barely containing his laughter. They stayed for less than an hour. The guy in the suit even tried to lure the horses out with carrots from the fridge, but Thunder is stubborn and wouldn't budge from the piano. We laughed together as he shared more funny details from the short visit. When we hung up, we were calmer, but the satisfaction remained. And now? Antonio asked, pouring me another glass of wine. What's the next step in your evil plan? I took a sip before answering. Now I wait. I'll let Marcelo stew for a few days, thinking I've really lost it. On Monday, Marta and SEU Joaquin will clean everything up and return the horses to the stable. And I'll only come back on Wednesday or Thursday, when the farm is spotless again. What if he really shows up with a lawyer? I shrugged. The farm is in my name, bought with my money. I have nothing to contest. Besides, what judge would accept a lawsuit for domestic terrorism involving horses and an ironic note? Antonio raised his glass in a silent toast, acknowledging the logic of my argument. We spent the rest of the night reminiscing about the old days when we were young executives building our careers, about the challenges of aging in a world that only values youth, and about our kids. Antonio has 2 kids, both living abroad, who call him religiously every week and visit him twice a year. I only realized how tired I was when I nearly knocked over my wine glass, overcome by sleep. Antonio showed me the guest room, and I slept like I hadn't in years. A deep, dreamless sleep, as if I had finally laid down a burden I had carried for so long. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of fresh coffee. Antonio was already up, preparing a breakfast that would put any luxury hotel to shame. Fresh fruits, assorted breads, cheeses, juices, scrambled eggs, and of course, a strong, fragrant coffee, just the way he knew how to make it. Did you sleep well, Masked Avenger? He joked as I sat down at the kitchen table. Like a rock, better than I have in weeks, to be honest. Must be the weight of your conscience lifted off your shoulders, he commented, sitting across from me. Or maybe it's just the pleasure of finally setting boundaries. That phrase made me reflect while I sipped my coffee, setting boundaries. Something I never did properly with Marcelo since it was just the 2 of us in the world. Maybe out of guilt, maybe out of fear of losing his love, maybe too busy building an empire to secure his future and forgetting to build his character. You know, Antonio, it all started with a phone call, I said, looking out the kitchen window that faced the park across from the building. A simple phone call that was the last straw. The famous Friday call? He asked, pouring more coffee. You still haven't told me exactly what made you snap. I took a deep breath, recalling the exact moment I decided I needed to teach my son a lesson. It was a calm Friday afternoon. I was on the balcony of Casager, reading a book I had postponed for years during my corporate life. The sky was painted with that particular shade of blue only seen in the countryside, free from the pollution of big cities. The macaws flew in pairs, chatting in their own language. Marta had just brought me a lemon balm tea picked from our own herb garden. That's when my phone rang. I saw Marcelo's name on the screen and felt that familiar pang, a mix of joy at hearing my son and apprehension knowing his calls usually meant he needed something. Hi, son. I answered, trying to keep my tone light. Mom, how are you? I'm calling to let you know I'm going to the farm tomorrow. The way he said let you know, not asking if he could go or checking if it was convenient, should have been my first warning, but I swallowed my irritation. Happy for the visit, even if uninvited. That's great, son. I'll prepare your room and make that chicken dish you liked when you were a kid. That's when he dropped the bomb. Oh, it's not just that. I'm bringing Patricia, of course, and her family too. Something froze inside me. Family, how many people? There was a pause, as if he was counting mentally or deciding whether to tell me the real number. Well, besides me and Patricia, there's Vittoria, her mother, her kids from her first marriage, Julia and Lucas, her brother Claudio with his wife Vanessa, cousin Raphael with his wife Christina. Oh, and 2 of Lucas's friends who are spending the weekend with him. I did the math. 12 people invading my house uninvited. 12 people using my towels, messing up my kitchen, disrupting my routine, ruining my peace. And the worst part? They didn't even ask if they could come. Son, the farm isn't ready for so many people. I don't have enough rooms or stocked food. That's when he interrupted me with a phrase that broke something inside me. Mom, I'm coming to the farm with my wife and 10 of her relatives. If you don't like it, just go back to the city. Tom was someone who gave orders to a maid, not a son talking to his mother. He was arrogant, presumptuous, disrespectful on every level. In that moment, all the years of concessions, of accepting inappropriate behavior, of buying his love with gifts and money, all the sacrifices I made to raise him alone, flashed before my eyes like a fast-forwarded movie. Fine, son. I turned to the city and replied with a calmness I didn't feel. He seemed surprised by my quick agreement. Really? You're not going to be upset? No, son, it's your home too. It was the lie I needed to buy time and plan my little revenge. As soon as I hung up, I stood still for a few minutes, feeling a mix of anger, hurt, and, curiously, a sort of liberation. It was as if that phrase had given me permission to finally do something I should have done years ago, show Marcelo that actions have consequences. I called Marta to the porch and told her what had happened. She had been working with me for almost a year and knew the dynamics between Marcelo and me well. She shook her head in indignation. Dona Luia, forgive my honesty, but your son needs boundaries. He thinks you're just an accessory in his life, something he can use and discard whenever he wants. Her words, though harsh, were true. I asked her to call Joaquim so we could talk. While we waited for him, I started to formulate a plan in my head. At first, they were just disconnected flashes of ideas. Hide the clean sheets, turn off the hot water, pretend there's a rat infestation. But then, a bolder idea began to take shape. When Joaquim arrived, it was already early evening. I served him some Jabuticable liqueur for all 3 of us, and we sat on the porch. The first stars were appearing in the sky, and the sound of crickets formed a natural symphony in the background. I have a problem and need your help. I started explaining the situation. Marta and Joaquim listened attentively, their faces shifting from indignation to curiosity as I began to outline my plan. The horses? In the house? Joaquim asked, nearly choking on the liqueur. Dona Luia, are you absolutely sure? I replied, feeling a firmness I hadn't experienced in years. I want Marcelo to understand that my house isn't a hotel he can book for his friends without my permission. I want him to feel what it's like to have his space invaded and disrespected. And the mess afterward, the damage? Marta asked, always practical. You'll clean everything up after they leave. I'll pay for extra hours, of course, and any damage will be repaired or replaced. The important thing is the lesson. We discussed the details for over an hour. Every element of the plan was carefully considered. Which horses would go into the house? The gentler ones? How would the pool be prepared? Where would the camera be installed? What's the exact content of the note and the cleaning company's phone number? Asked Joaquim. Is it yours, Marta? I replied. If Marcelo calls asking about the service, tell him the price is really 12,000 and that we can only attend on Monday. Marta laughed, getting into the spirit of the joke. Can I speak with a different accent? I've always wanted to be an actress. We laughed together, feeling that special bond that forms when people come together in a little conspiracy. Before we said goodbye that night, I made sure to thank both of them. I know this goes beyond your normal duties. Thank you for understanding and helping me. Joaquim, a man of few words, just nodded respectfully. Dona Luia, you've always been fair with us, and sometimes a child needs to learn the hard way. Marta added, my mother used to say that love without limits isn't love, it's neglect. That phrase echoed in my mind as I prepared to sleep. Love without limits. Wasn't that exactly what I had done with Marcelo? Giving him everything, asking for little in return, accepting behaviors that hurt me deeply just to avoid conflict. The next morning, I woke up early, even before the sun rose. I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the mist cover the valley like a soft cloak. I felt a strange peace, as if I was finally doing something I should have done a long time ago. I returned to the present, in Antonio's kitchen, realizing I had been silent for a while, lost in my memories. Are you okay? He asked, concerned. Yes, just reminiscing about how I got here, I replied, going back to my breakfast. You know, Antonio, sometimes I wonder if I'm being too harsh, if this lesson will only push Marcelo further away. Antonio thought for a moment before responding, Luia, I've known you for almost 40 years. I've seen how you sacrificed everything for your son, how you gave up relationships, time for yourself, trips you wanted to take, all to ensure he had the best. And how did he repay you? By treating you like a convenience, someone who exists only to serve him. He paused, taking a sip of coffee. Maybe it's too late to completely change the dynamic between you, but it's never too late to set boundaries and demand respect. If that pushes Marcelo away, maybe it's because your relationship has always been based on what you could give, not on true love. His words were harsh but necessary. And deep down, I knew they were true. So, do you think I did the right thing? I asked, still seeking some validation. I think you did what needed to be done, and honestly, it was much more creative and less destructive than it could have been. He replied with a smile. Besides, I think a little humiliation is good for character once in a while, especially for someone who's never had to face consequences. I smiled, feeling the weight of guilt lift a little. That Sunday would be one of waiting, processing emotions, preparing for the eventual confrontation with my son, but for now, I was at peace with my decision. Well, what do you want to do today? Antonio asked, starting to clear the breakfast dishes. We could visit that exhibition at the Central Museum or just take a walk in the park. Actually, I'd like to do something I haven't done in a long time, I replied. I want to go to the movies, eat popcorn until I feel sick, and then maybe have ice cream like a rebellious teenager. Antonio Rio. Look, the revolution is just beginning, and that's how our Sunday went. No worries about the farm, Marcelo, or anything else, just enjoying the moment. It was a new beginning for me, not just setting boundaries with my son, but also rediscovering who I was, beyond being a mother, beyond being a businesswoman, beyond all the labels I had carried for so many years. The call on Friday had been just the catalyst for a much deeper transformation, one that at 64, I was finally ready to embrace. Monday dawned with a cloudy sky in the capital. I looked out the window of Antonio's guest room, watching the hurried people below, all in coats, rushing to their commitments. It was a stark contrast to the quiet life I had chosen for myself on the farm. Here, everything was rush, honking, anonymous faces barely looking at each other. My phone had been off since Saturday. I decided it was time to check the damage. I took a deep breath and turned it on, bracing myself for the flood of notifications. It took less than 5 seconds. 27 missed calls from Marcelo, 12 from Patricia, 5 from unknown numbers that I guessed were other frustrated members of the group, and 43 text messages. I opened the first message from Marcelo sent on Saturday at 5:42 p.m. Mom, what kind of madness is this? Call me urgently. The second one, at 6:15 p.m. This is completely unacceptable. Where are you? The third at 7:30 p.m. Mom, I'm worried. This isn't normal. Are you okay? Are you with someone? Please respond. It's interesting how concern only came after the initial anger. I continued reading the messages, which gradually changed tone. The last one sent the night before had a more conciliatory tone. Mom, I understand you're upset, but we need to talk like adults. Call me when you can. If it's about the unannounced visit, I apologize, but there were better ways to say that. Please, call me. I didn't respond to any messages. It wasn't the moment yet. I wanted the lesson to continue to simmer for a while longer. I went downstairs to find Antonio already preparing breakfast. He was an impeccable host, something I learned to greatly appreciate after years of hosting and being hosted for purely strategic reasons during my career. So, how many threats of disinheritance have you received? He joked, pouring me a cup of coffee. Surprisingly, none. It seems that after the initial anger, he's starting to reflect, or at least pretending to convince me to come back. Typical. When they realize that angry manipulation doesn't work, they try guilt manipulation instead, Antonio commented, sitting across from me. And what's the plan for today? I took a sip of coffee before responding. I need to call Joaquin to check on things at the farm. And then, well, I think I need to buy a few things for myself. It's been a while since I treated myself to that luxury. Great idea. There's a new mall 2 blocks away. I can join you if you want. I gladly accepted the invitation. After breakfast, I called Joaquin using the backup phone. He answered promptly, as always. Good morning, Mrs. Luia. How are you? I'm fine, Joaquin. And you? How are things? And our 4-legged guests? He laughed before responding. The horses are doing very well, maybe even too well. It seems they like the new environment. The little one is sleeping on the living room couch, can you believe it? I had to go in to give them food and water. And Thunder discovered he likes the sound of the piano. He keeps tapping his nose on the keys. I couldn't help but laugh, imagining the scene. Any sign from Marcelo or the others? None, Mrs. Luia. They left on Saturday and haven't come back. Marta took 2 calls from the number you said was your son's, pretending to be from the cleaning company. She said she could only send the team on Tuesday and confirmed the price of 12,000 Brazilian reals. He hung up on her both times. Great. Exactly as we planned. Can you start the cleaning tomorrow? Yes, ma'am. I've already hired 2 guys from town to help with the heavy work. By Wednesday afternoon, the house will be as good as new. You can rest easy. I thanked her and hung up, feeling a twinge of guilt for the extra work I was giving them, but also satisfaction that the plan was going smoothly. Antonio and I spent tomorrow at the mall. It felt strange to be back in such an environment after so long in the tranquility of the farm. The noise, the lights, the background music, people rushing around. Everything felt excessive and a bit overwhelming, but there was also a certain pleasure in rediscovering simple things, like trying on clothes at leisure, choosing a new perfume, sitting in a cafe and watching the hustle. I bought some nicer clothes than my usual farm attire. Not because I needed them, but because I wanted to remind myself that I was still that confident businesswoman, even after choosing a simpler lifestyle. I also bought a better quality straw hat than my old, worn one and a turquoise blue dress that matched my eyes. Something Antonio insisted I should have. By late morning, while we were having coffee, I decided to check social media. Another habit I had practically abandoned in recent months was when I saw that Patricia, my influencer daughter-in-law, had made a post the day before that indirectly talked about the incident. The photo showed her in a luxury hotel in the capital, probably where they went after leaving the farm, with a champagne glass in hand and a falsely thoughtful expression. The caption read, "Sometimes life surprises you with unexpected challenges. What matters is how you react to them." in overcoming, in family imprinting, in resilience. In the comments, some people were asking what had happened, and she vaguely responded about family problems and toxic situations, clearly wanting to appear as the victim of the story without going into details that could be embarrassing. I showed it to Antonio, who shook his head in disbelief. Unbelievable how some people can turn any situation into a drama where they are the wronged protagonists. The worst part is that she's probably staying in a 5-star hotel with a nightly rate more expensive than the 12,000 Brazilian reals for the cleaning. But that's fine, because it's not her paying, it's Marcelo with the money I still deposit monthly into his account, supposedly for investments. This realization hit me like a punch in the stomach. I was still supporting my 42-year-old son, a successful executive earning an excellent salary. The farm wasn't the only area of my life where I needed to set boundaries. After lunch, Antonio needed to go to the office to take care of some matters, and I decided to walk in the park in front of his building. The day remained cloudy but pleasant for a stroll. I sat on a bench by the artificial lake, watching the ducks and thinking about the situation with Marcelo. That's when my main phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize immediately. I answered cautiously. "Hello, this is Victoria, Patricia's mother, my mother-in-law." I wasn't expecting that. I took a deep breath before responding, "Hello, Victoria. How can I help you? You know very well what it means to leave animals loose inside the house. Do you realize the trouble you caused? My daughter is traumatized. She lost an expensive designer bag that got completely ruined." I kept my voice calm, contrasting with her shrill tone. "Victoria, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. I just left my house to give you space, as my son suggested. If he didn't check the conditions of the farm before inviting 12 people, that's his responsibility, not mine." "Misunderstanding? You left a note demanding 12,000 Brazilian reals to clean the house. Is that extortion?" "No, Victoria. That's the market price to clean a property of that size after horses lived in it for a while. Consult any specialized company." There was silence on the other end, as if she didn't expect such a direct and calm response. "Look here. I don't know what game you're playing, but my daughter and son-in-law are very upset. Patricia is even thinking about posting on social media about this. She has 500,000 followers, you know? So that was it, a veiled threat of public exposure." I smiled to myself before responding, "Victoria, tell your daughter she's free to share with her followers how she arrived unannounced at her mother-in-law's house with 10 relatives. As I told her only son, if she didn't like the invasion, she could just go back to the city." And how horrified she was to find out that surprise, the mother-in-law actually returned to the city and left the house available for them, just as they suggested. I'm sure your followers will love this story of overcoming and resilience. Another longer silence this time. "You're crazy," she finally said, but with less conviction. "No, Victoria, I'm just tired. Tired of being treated as a convenient accessory in my son's and your daughter's lives. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other commitments." "Have a good day." I hung up before she could respond. My heart raced, but not from fear or anxiety. It was the adrenaline of finally standing my ground, defending my space and my dignity. It was a feeling I had almost forgotten from the days when I faced competitors and negotiated million-dollar contracts without hesitation. I returned to Antonio's apartment, feeling lighter and more determined. When he got back from the office in the late afternoon, I told him about the call from Victoria. "Did you really say all that to her?" he asked, impressed. "Every word. And you know what's most interesting? I didn't feel guilty at all. On the contrary, I felt like I was reclaiming a part of myself that had been asleep." He smiled proudly. The Luia he had known for 40 years, the one who wasn't afraid to face a room full of male executives and make her opinion heard, was back. We had dinner at a nearby restaurant, reminiscing about the old days and making plans. He was preparing for a trip to Italy the following month to visit his youngest son. I was thinking about the improvements I wanted to make on the farm, expanding the herb garden, building a greenhouse to grow organic vegetables year-round, maybe even starting a small local business selling homemade jams. On Tuesday morning, I woke up early again. I had slept exceptionally well, free from the recurring nightmares I had on the farm, where I often dreamed I was late for important meetings or had forgotten crucial details of a contract. I called Mr. Joaquim to check on the cleaning progress. "Good morning, Mrs. Luia. We're working hard here. The horses are back in the stable and doing well. We've started cleaning the living room and kitchen. The guys from town are helping a lot. Marta is supervising everything with an iron hand." "Great, Joaquim. Any sign of Marcelo?" "No, ma'am. No calls, no visits." I thanked him and hung up, thinking it was time to take the next step. I picked up my main phone and, for the first time since Saturday, replied to one of Marcelo's messages. "I'm fine. I'll be back at the farm on Thursday. If you want to talk, we can meet there alone." Simple, straightforward, no drama or explanations. I locked my phone and put it on the bedside table, deciding I wouldn't check for responses just yet. The ball was now in his court. I spent the rest of the day helping Antonio organize documents for his trip to Italy. It felt good to have something practical to focus on, as well as a way to repay his hospitality. In the late afternoon, he suggested we go to a classical music concert at the Municipal Theater, something I loved and hadn't done in years. The concert was revitalizing. Music has always had an almost therapeutic effect on me, especially Mozart, who was the composer of the night. I closed my eyes during the performance of Ein Kleinnacht music, letting the notes transport me to a place of pure beauty and harmony. On Wednesday, I woke up with a sense of urgency. It was time to prepare for my return to the farm. I called Mr. Joaquim again, who informed me that the cleaning was almost finished. The house was practically as it was before, except for a few minor damages that would need specific repairs. A broken leg on the piano. Apparently, Thunder was heavier than he looked. Some hoof marks on the wooden floor and the Persian rug in the living room, which, despite being professionally cleaned, still held memories or traces of the horses. "Don't worry about that, Joaquim. I'll arrange for the repairs when I get back. The important thing is that it's livable and relatively presentable." I spent the rest of the morning grocery shopping to restock the farm. Antonio insisted on joining me, helping to pick the best products and carry the bags. It was a luxury to have such helpful male company, something I hadn't experienced since Roberto's death. In the afternoon, I finally checked Marcelo's responses to my message. To my surprise, there was only one sent just minutes after mine. "I'll be there. Thanks for responding." No drama, no accusations, just a simple confirmation. Maybe, just maybe, the lesson was starting to take effect. On Thursday morning, I was ready to return to the farm. Antonio insisted on driving me, even though I had my truck. "I'll go with you and take a taxi back. I want to make sure you arrive safely and that there won't be any unpleasant surprises." I accepted his offer, touched by his genuine concern. During the 3-hour drive to the farm, we talked about everything and nothing, like old friends do. He shared his retirement plans. Just 2 years to go. About his desire to write a memoir. About the possibility of spending longer stays in Italy with his youngest son. "And you, Luia, what do you really want for the coming years?" he asked, keeping his eyes on the road. I looked out the window, watching the landscape gradually shift from urban to rural, buildings giving way to open fields and distant mountains. "I want peace, Antonio, but not that passive peace of someone who just accepts what life brings. I want the active peace of someone who makes conscious choices, who sets healthy boundaries, who lives with purpose." He nodded in understanding. "And what do you expect from your meeting with Marcelo today?" I sighed, thinking carefully before answering. I don't expect miracles. I know we won't resolve decades of dysfunctional patterns in one conversation, but I hope to plant a seed of change. I want him to start seeing me as a person, not as an extension of himself or a resource to be used. And if he's not ready for that change, then I'll have to accept that too and set my boundaries anyway, even if it means seeing him less often. Antonio smiled, gently squeezing my hand, which rested between the seats. You've always been the strongest person I know, Luia, even when you thought you weren't. We arrived at the farm just after noon. The road of hope was a bit muddy from recent rain, but perfectly passable. When the farm gate appeared, I felt that familiar sense of arriving home, of belonging. Marta and Joaquin were waiting for us on the porch of Casager. Their faces wore broad smiles and a certain expression of warmth that made me smile too. "Welcome back, Mrs. Luia," Marta exclaimed, coming down the steps to help me with the bags. "The house is all ready, waiting for you, and the horses miss you," Joaquin added with a cheeky grin, especially Mimoso. I think he enjoyed the comfort of the living room sofa. We laughed together as we entered the house. The interior was spotless, smelling of lemon and rosemary. The mixture Marta used to clean the wooden floors. There was no trace of the equine guests, except for a few discreet marks on the floor that only someone who knew the house well would notice. "You did an amazing job," I genuinely praised, impressed. "Thank you so much for everything. You were essential for this educational lesson." Marta smiled proudly. "It was a pleasure, Mrs. Luia. Your son really needed to learn that you don't treat a mother like that." Antonio, who had been watching the interaction with interest, asked, "What time is Marcelo supposed to arrive?" I looked at the clock. It was 12:45. He didn't specify, but I imagine he'll come in the late afternoon, after work. "So, we have time for a nice lunch," Antonio concluded. "How about we prepare something together?" We brought fresh groceries from the city. The idea was met with enthusiasm. The four of us went to the kitchen, and in a nearly therapeutic activity, we prepared a simple yet delicious lunch. Fresh garden salad, brown rice with vegetables, and a roasted chicken with herbs that Marta mastered like no one else. As we ate on the porch overlooking the valley with the mountains in the background, I felt a deep gratitude for that moment, for those people, for that place. No matter what happened with Marcelo later, I had built something valuable here, not just a house, but a home, with people who genuinely cared about me. After lunch, Antonio said goodbye, promising to call later to check on how the meeting with Marcelo went. Marta and Mr. Joaquim also left for their respective homes, leaving me alone to prepare for the conversation ahead. I took a long shower, put on one of the new outfits I had bought in town, light linen pants and a turquoise blouse, and tied my gray hair in a simple yet elegant bun. I wanted to feel confident and centered for this meeting. Around 5 p.m., I heard the sound of a car approaching. My heart raced slightly, but I took a deep breath, reminding myself of my purpose. It was the moment of truth, time to set new terms for my relationship with my son. I went to the porch to wait for his arrival, feeling strangely calm. The sun was beginning to set behind the mountains, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, a perfect frame for what I hoped would be a new beginning. Marcelo's black BMW slowly entered the gravel driveway, kicking up a small cloud of golden dust illuminated by the sun. My son had always loved making dramatic entrances since he was a child. I remembered how he insisted on being the last to arrive at his friends' birthday parties so everyone would notice his presence. Some things never change. I remained seated in the rocking chair on the porch, my hands resting peacefully on my lap. I decided not to go to him. That conversation would happen on my terms, in my territory. The car stopped, and the engine quieted. Marcelo stayed inside the vehicle for a few seconds, probably gathering courage or mentally rehearsing what he would say. Finally, the door opened, and he emerged alone. A good sign. He wore a perfectly tailored navy suit, no tie, with the white shirt unbuttoned at the top, always so concerned about appearances, even for a visit to the farm. I watched him as he closed the car door and looked around, as if searching for signs of the weekend's events. Our eyes met, and for a moment, I saw something in his gaze that I couldn't fully decipher. A mix of apprehension, confusion, and perhaps, just perhaps, a glimmer of regret. "Hi, Mom," he said, walking toward me. His voice sounded more restrained than usual, lacking his typical overconfidence. "Hello, Marcelo," I replied, gesturing to the chair beside me. "Have a seat." He obeyed. something rare. Normally, he would have made some comment about preferring to stand or about the chair being dusty, but this time he simply sat down and remained silent for a few moments, contemplating the sunset that colored the sky above the Recanto das Araras farm. "It's a beautiful night," I commented casually, as if our last interaction hadn't been a series of furious messages after an incident involving horses in the living room. "Yes," he replied, clearing his throat slightly. "Mom, about the weekend," I gently raised my hand, interrupting him. "Let's have coffee first. The conversation will be long, and I'd rather be comfortable." Without waiting for a response, I stood up and walked into the house. After a moment of hesitation, I heard his footsteps following me. In the kitchen, I prepared the Italian coffee maker I had brought from Sao Paulo when I moved, one of the few items I have sentimental attachment to. The ritual of making coffee has always calmed me, even on the most stressful days at the company. "The house looks immaculate," Marcelo commented, looking around with evident surprise. "Doesn't it seem like 5 horses lived here for a weekend?" I added, allowing myself a small smile. "Marta and Joaquim are very efficient. There were some damages, of course. The Persian rug in the living room will need to be replaced. And one of the legs of the piano broke. Apparently, Thunder is a music lover with very heavy hooves." Marcelo looked at me, clearly trying to decipher my mood. "Mom, did you really let horses inside the house?" Intentionally, I placed 2 cups of coffee on the kitchen table and sat down, indicating for him to do the same. "Yes," I replied simply, looking him in the eyes deliberately. "But why?" "That's crazy," I suggested, taking a sip of coffee. "Bizarre, extreme, maybe. But you know what else is extreme, Marcelo? Calling your 64-year-old mother and saying you're bringing 12 people to her house without a proper invitation. And then adding that if she doesn't like it, she can just go back to the city." He looked away, a blush of embarrassment coloring his face. "I didn't mean it that way." "How did you mean it then?" "Explain to me." Marcelo stirred his coffee unnecessarily, a nervous habit he had since adolescence. "I just thought you'd be happy to have us, that you'd enjoy the company." 12 people aren't company, Marcelo. 12 people are an invasion, especially when 9 of them are practically strangers to me. "They're Patricia's family," he protested weakly. "Yes, and I'm sure they're lovely people, but this is my home, not a free family resort. You didn't consult me, you didn't ask if it would be convenient, you didn't consider for a moment that I might have other plans or simply not want to turn my space into a lodging for a small army." He opened his mouth to respond but closed it again, apparently without arguments. After a moment, he asked quietly, "Did you plan all of that? The horses, the dirty pool, the message?" "Yes," I admitted, straightforwardly. "It was carefully planned." "But why?" "We could have talked." I placed my cup on the table with a bit more force than necessary. "Talked, Marcelo? We've been talking for years, and you never listen. It's always been like this. I talk, you agree, and then you do exactly what you want. I needed to create a situation you couldn't ignore." A heavy silence fell between us. Outside, the sky now displayed shades of purple and deep blue. The first stars began to appear. "Do you know how much that suitcase of Patricia's that got ruined cost?" he finally asked, with a slightly accusatory tone. I raised an eyebrow. "I have no idea, but I'm sure it's less than what it would cost to renovate this house if I let you treat it like a public space with no rules or limits." 8,000 Brazilian reals, he said, as if the amount justified his outrage. "Interesting," I replied calmly. "And how much is the Persian rug in the living room that got ruined? The one you said was a waste of money when I bought it?" "I don't know," he murmured. 30,000 Brazilian reals. And do you know how much respect is worth, Marcelo? Respect for someone else's space, for privacy, for autonomy? That has no price. Another silence settled between us, heavier than the last. Marcelo seemed genuinely uncomfortable now, shifting in his chair, avoiding my gaze. "Patricia is furious," he eventually said. "Her mother too." They even threatened to file a lawsuit. I couldn't help but let out a small laugh. For what reason exactly? Because I left my own house, as you suggested, for leaving my own animals on my property? I'd be happy to discuss that with any judge. It won't come to that, he rushed to say. I'll convince them to drop the idea. Good. It would at least be an interesting case. Family invades a woman's home and gets outraged upon finding undesirable conditions. It would make a great case for law students. I stood up and went to the fridge, grabbing a pitcher of homemade orange juice that Marta had prepared. I poured 2 glasses and returned to the table. Marcelo, I didn't do this to humiliate you or your wife. I did it because I needed you to understand once and for all that I am not an accessory in your life. I am a person with rights, limits, and dignity. He took a sip of juice, seeming to reflect on my words. I never thought of you as an accessory, he protested, but with less conviction. No. Then why do you act as if my time, my space, and my resources are always at your disposal? Why do you assume I can rearrange my life to accommodate your last-minute plans? Why do you think it's normal to tell me to go back to the city if I don't like the invasion you planned? Marcelo was silent for a long moment, and I could see on his face that he was truly considering my questions. Finally, he said quietly, I guess it's always been this way, hasn't it? Since Dad died, you've always been there, sorting everything out, available for everything. Yes, I agreed. I was because you were a child and needed me. But you're 42 now, Marcelo. You have a career, a wife, a life of your own. And I have mine too. I stood up and walked to the kitchen window, watching the darkness that now enveloped the farm, punctuated only by the soft lights of the garden that automatically turned on at dusk. When your father died, I promised myself you would never miss anything, that you would have all the opportunities, all the comforts, all the support. I worked tirelessly for that. I sacrificed relationships, time, health. I turned to face him, but I think I made a serious mistake in the process. What mistake? He asked, seeming genuinely curious. I forgot to teach you that the world doesn't revolve around you, that other people have needs, desires, and limits that must be respected. That love doesn't mean unconditional submission. Marcelo lowered his eyes to the table, visibly affected by my words. When he spoke again, his voice was choked. I never thought I was being so selfish. I'm not calling you selfish, son. I'm saying we created a dysfunctional pattern together. I always giving in and compensating. You always waiting and assuming. And now I'm breaking that pattern. I came back to the table and sat down again, this time taking your hands in mine. A gesture of affection we haven't shared in years. Marcelo, I love you. You are my only son, my greatest pride. But our relationship needs to change, it needs to be based on mutual respect, not unilateral expectations. He squeezed my hands lightly, his eyes misty. I'm sorry, Mom, for the weekend, for the call, for everything. You're right. I didn't think of you, only what was convenient for me and Patricia. It was the first time in a long time that I saw my son truly vulnerable, without the facade of confidence and control he usually displayed. I felt my heart soften, but I stayed firm in my purpose. I accept your apology, but more important than words are actions. I want to establish some basic rules for our future interactions. He seemed genuinely willing to listen. First, this is my house. You are always welcome here, but with notice and preferably just you and Patricia, not her whole family. Second, when you're here, respect my space and my rules. Third, don't assume I can rearrange my life to accommodate your last-minute plans. Marcelo was listening attentively, which was rare. Normally, he'd be checking his phone or showing signs of impatience. And there's one more thing, I added, deciding to address another elephant in the room. Starting next month, there will be no more monthly deposits into your account. His eyes widened. But Mom, that money is for investments, for our future. Marcelo, you earn more than enough as a marketing director. Patricia has her career as an influencer. You live in an apartment I bought and transferred to your name. You have 2 luxury cars and take 3 international trips a year. You don't need my money. He opened his mouth to protest but closed it again, seemingly recognizing the truth in my words. If you need help in a real emergency, I'll be here. But regular financial support ends now. It's time for you to live entirely on your own means. There was a moment of tension, and I could see emotions passing over Marcelo's face. Surprise, indignation, concern, and finally, a kind of resignation. All right, he finally said. You're right. We don't need that money. It's just that it's always been this way. Exactly. It's always been this way, but it doesn't have to continue being. You are an adult, successful, perfectly capable of supporting your lifestyle. He nodded slowly, seeming to process this new reality. We sat in silence for a few minutes, just sipping our coffee and juice, each lost in our own thoughts. And what about Patricia? He finally asked. She's still very upset. I don't know if she'll want to come back here anytime soon. I shrugged slightly. That's up to her. The door is open as long as she comes with respect. As for the suitcase, well, accidents happen. I'll buy another for her, Marcelo said. With my money, he added quickly. I smiled, realizing he might actually be starting to understand. Good decision. I stood up and began to gather the cups, signaling that our conversation was coming to an end. Marcelo also stood up, looking a bit unsure about what to do next. Are you staying for dinner? I asked. Can I? He replied with a hesitation I had never seen before. Of course. Marta left a lasagna ready. I just need to heat it up. While I was putting the lasagna in the oven, Marcelo stayed in the kitchen, watching me with a thoughtful expression. You know, Mom, he said after a moment. I never realized how much you've changed since you moved here. What do you mean? I asked, adjusting the oven temperature. You seem more like yourself, stronger, more determined. In the city, it sometimes felt like you were just playing a role, the businesswoman, the mother, the benefactor. Here, it seems like you're finally living for yourself. His words surprised me. I didn't expect such an insightful observation from him. It's true, I admitted. I spent most of my adult life being what others needed me to be. Here, for the first time, I'm just being Luia. I'm happy for you, he said, and he seemed sincere. Even if it took a horse incident in the living room for me to realize this, I couldn't help but laugh, and he joined in. It was a nice sound. A mother and son laughing together, something that hadn't happened in a long time. We had dinner on the porch under a starry sky, chatting about trivial things, his work, my plans for the farm, books we had read recently. It was a normal conversation, without tension or expectations. Just 2 adults sharing a moment. When he got ready to leave late at night, he surprised me with a spontaneous hug, something we hadn't shared in years. Thank you, Mom, he said by my ear. For the lesson. I needed it. You're welcome, son, I replied, feeling an unexpected emotion in my throat. Sometimes love needs to be tough too. I walked him to the car and stayed on the porch, watching the taillights disappear into the darkness of Hope Road. The name felt particularly fitting that night. I went back inside the house, my home, my sanctuary, feeling a peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. I knew that one dinner wouldn't solve decades of dysfunctional patterns. I knew there would be setbacks, moments of tension, maybe even new crises, but something fundamental had changed, a boundary had been set, a new respect had been born. And I, Luia Brandao, at 64, had finally found my voice. As I prepared for bed, I looked out my bedroom window at the starry sky above Recanto das Araras. Tomorrow would be a new day, the first of many in this new phase of my life. A life where I was no longer just Marcelo's mother, the former businesswoman, Roberto's widow. I was simply Luia, a woman in charge of her destiny, her space, and her heart. And that feeling, I discovered, was worth much more than any Persian rug. So, my dear ones, that was the story of how I turned a situation of disrespect into a valuable lesson for both my son and myself. You know, when we reach a certain age, people start treating us like we're invisible or disposable, as if our desires, our privacy, and our space no longer matter. That hurts. It hurts deeply. After a lifetime of working, raising my son alone after becoming a widow at such a young age, building a business from scratch, sacrificing my dreams and desires for his sake, I deserved to be treated with dignity. That phone call on Friday was just the last straw in an ocean of disrespect that had been building for years. I'm arriving at the farm with my wife and 10 of her relatives. If you don't like it, just go back to the city. Those words pierced me like a knife. All of you who follow me here on the channel know I'm not a vengeful or petty person. But at that moment, I decided it was time to teach a lesson about respect, about boundaries, about valuing those who have always been by your side. And what better lesson than to show exactly what it's like to have your space invaded and disrespected? The horses in the living room, the pool turned into a small swamp, the mattresses piled in the middle of the bedrooms. Everything was carefully planned to make an impact, but without causing irreparable harm. And that note? Oh, that note was my little masterpiece. The cost of a day's cleaning for this farm is 12,000 Brazilian reals. Expensive, yes, but not as costly as a lifetime of being taken for granted. The shock on Marcelo's face when he opened the door, Patricia's outrage at seeing her designer bag ruined by horse urine, the entire family's panic trying to understand what had happened. I confess I watched it all on my tablet with a satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't malice, it was poetic justice. And the conversation we had afterward, when he returned alone to meet me, was a turning point. I saw my son truly see me for the first time in decades, not as the bank mother, the hotel mother, the servant mother, but as a person with feelings, with boundaries, deserving of respect. Thank you, Mom, for the lesson. I needed it. Those words meant more than any formal apology. I know many of you are wondering, but Mrs. Luia, was it worth the work, the money spent on cleaning, the risk of alienating your son? And my answer is a resounding yes, because some lessons need to be dramatic to be truly learned. Because there are moments in life when we need to stand our ground, or we will continue to be trampled, because respect, when not given willingly, must be demanded. This story isn't just about a mother teaching a lesson to her adult son. It's about all of us, mature women, who are often sidelined, treated as convenient only when we can offer something, money, time, care, without anything being offered in return. It's about saying no when necessary, about setting clear boundaries, about demanding the respect we deserve. Today, my relationship with Marcelo is different, not perfect. Perfection doesn't exist in human relationships, but it's honest, more balanced. He calls before coming over, asks if it's convenient, respects my space and my time. Our meetings are less frequent, but infinitely more meaningful. And more importantly, I cut the financial cord that still tied us dysfunctionally, forcing him to live completely as the adult he is. As for Patricia and her family, well, let's just say they haven't returned to the farm since then, and honestly, I don't miss them. My home is peaceful. My time is mine. I can wake up and sleep whenever I want, eat what I desire, read my books in peace. The horses are happy in their stable, although Mimoso occasionally gazes nostalgically at the door of the house, as if missing the Italian leather sofa. And I, Luia Brandeo, at 64 years old, have finally learned that it's never too late to reinvent yourself, to set boundaries, to demand respect. Aging is not a sentence of invisibility. It's an opportunity to be more authentic, more courageous, more yourself. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this story, it's that. No matter your age, your gender, your family situation, you deserve respect. Your space is yours, your time is yours, your choices are yours. And if it takes letting 5 horses loose in the room to teach someone that, well, do what needs to be done. Now, my dear friends who have followed me through this tale, I need to ask something important. If this story touched you, brought a smile to your face, or perhaps even inspired you to think about boundaries in your own life, Please help this channel continue sharing these real and heartfelt stories. Click the subscribe button right below. It's free and means the world to me. Besides subscribing, please give this video a like. It helps more people find our stories. And please share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in my place? Have you been in a similar situation? How do you set boundaries with family members who overstep? Your comments not only help me connect with you, but also create this wonderful community where we can share experiences and learn from each other. Every comment is read by me, and many of them become inspiration for new videos. And if this story truly meant something to you, consider supporting the channel through Value Dem Ace, our donation system. It's like a virtual coffee you're offering me, allowing me to keep producing quality daily content, paying the team that helps me with recordings and edits, and bringing you even more interesting and well-crafted stories. The link is in the video description, and any amount, no matter how small, makes a huge difference. The channel exists to show that our life stories, especially after 60, are not less important, less exciting, or less valuable. On the contrary, we carry decades of experiences, lessons, mistakes, and successes that can inspire younger generations. And to keep sharing these stories, we need your support. In the next video, I'll share about when I discovered at 58 that my husband was keeping a second family in another city and how I turned that devastating discovery into an opportunity for liberation. You won't want to miss it. Turn on the notification bell to be alerted as soon as the video goes live. Always remember, age is just a number. What truly matters is how you position yourself in the world, how you demand respect, how you live authentically. And if someone tries to walk all over that, well, you can always count on a few horses to help teach a memorable lesson. Thank you so much for watching this far. This is Luia Brandeo from the channel. Remember, our stories deserve to be told, heard, and respected.